Good afternoon. My name is Sean Talley. I am a candidate for the Chief Human Resources Officer position, and I'd love to talk to you about my entry plan, first 100 days, built on listening, aligning, and building momentum. So, the first commitment that I'll make is really in three areas. I'll be doing a lot of listening, a lot of aligning, and a lot of acting. The listening will really be centered around the real stakeholders here. So I want to make sure I understand what the true employee experience is, and not just for teachers, although that's most of the team, but also the other staff as well. I'd be looking into how the leadership feels about the HR team, HR support that it's received, and then also see how the students are feeling about things as well as the community, um, their thoughts about the direction that we're moving in. And also look at aligning, making sure that my team is spending time on the priorities that drive the most value for the school system, and then acting in a way that is definitely focused on momentum. So essentially, you're going to see me talking about building on our strengths, using our evidence, and that's all the data that we have, and then looking to lead through partnerships. I'm a collaborative leader. I like to talk things through and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to give their point of view because that really builds collaboration, shared ownership, that sort of thing. So I mentioned that momentum earlier. So what does that look like? Well, you got a lot of great momentum going on there. So there has been a lot of enhancements to recruitment that I've seen in the information. Very strong retention. There's been some progress on the HR systems. Really partnerships with the employee, and then some service orientation. And it looks like very soon you're going to be looking at celebrating some additional wins when it looks like through your workforce planning, leadership pipeline, workforce analytics, and some other things going on there. And as you can see, some just really big shout out there. You know, that 92 percent retention rate is a great thing. Do need to keep an eye on those retirement eligible folks, but that's definitely something that is managed through proper leadership pipeline and workforce development. And it can be a great thing. And then obviously keeping an eye on that first year attrition as well. So as I mentioned before, definitely some wonderful things to build on. And really that's what it's about, just not really reinventing the wheel. As I continue along, I think it's very important to be specific about where I'm getting my information and data from. And so I would use a structured assessment essentially, where my goal would be to identify any areas that are believed to be strengths, any areas that would be maybe not necessarily a strength, but something that's proficient that can be built on. And also look at things that might be opportunities for growth and the readiness in terms of where things are in those pipelines. So it's very important for me to really build relationships with the stakeholders. That's obviously the HR team, the superintendent and the cabinet, any other school leaders, the board as well, obviously, the union, any other employee associations, the community, PTA. Everybody is a stakeholder here in terms of the goal of the best student outcomes possible. So it's very important to make sure that we hear all those voices, especially for me as I'm looking to assess and see what's going on in my first 100 days. My output would really be to be able to prepare something and present something that is really a current state assessment. And then based on that assessment and the data that it's provided, to come up with some recommendations. And you can see some of the organizational things that I would be looking at as well, just so I could get an idea. I kind of look at the stuff on the left there these conversations. That's kind of the qualitative assessment, and then the quantitative assessment, this diagnostic column here. So that's, strategic plan, the annual report, looking at some very specific workforce KPIs, looking at things like the attrition, retention, but essentially really just being able to take a good look at the data and see where the data is taking us. So, as I pull this information together, as I'm listening and assessing, I really want to understand really what I'm looking at. And a big part of that is the framework that I'm going to be looking at. So, as I gather this information, it's very important for me to understand if there's strategic direction and alignment. So, as I mentioned before, making sure that from HR standpoint, the HR team is moving in the same direction as the rest of the school system. So, it's important that those priorities are aligned. There's a cascading feature that I believe in, and I believe that every employee should be able to vertically look up and see where some sort of goal where their efforts are driving toward that goal. We'll look at capabilities, making sure that we actually have the tools in place to enable those outcomes. So it's great to have alignment, but sometimes the people that are out there executing, they need the right tools to get the job done. A lot of that will come in hand, and I'll be measuring that just through the evidence. Right? Um, Once you've got kind of the direction and alignment and you've got those capabilities rolling along, the next thing you got to make sure that you have processes and accountability or empowerment in place. So if you obviously have the strategy and you have the tools in place, then you also have to make sure you're looking at those tools to make sure that there's a shared empowerment, that decision making and performance are being looked at. And those are things that can be checked pretty easily when it comes to KPIs. So once you've got your direction in place, your capabilities in place, you've got your processes and empowerment in place, you got to make sure that things are reliable and sustainable. So you don't want things to just kind of fall apart after the attention and the spotlight walks away. You want to make sure those practices are consistently deployed, and you can really validate that through results. And then finally, you want to make sure that all of this is being driven from a talent and culture perspective. Essentially, are the employees engaged in that success? In short, do you have the right people in the right place to do the things that you want to do? And again, the guiding principles here are really to be data informed, to make sure that stakeholders can look at what we're doing and see the logic and what's going on and communicating. And again, it's all about those evidence based decisions. So next, I want to talk about communicating, engaging, and sustaining. And this is where really that shared vision and inclusion come in. And this goes back to the same thing that I talked about, building on strengths, using evidence, leading through partnership. So, from a communication standpoint, it's very important with any sort of change or anything that's new. You really want to get that shared vision. And you get that shared vision by not just communicating, but that communication has to be consistent and has to be reliable. People have to know, oh, okay, I'm going to hear from this person once a month. I'm going to hear from them once a quarter or whatever it may be. They need to be able to rely on you doing the things that you say you're going to do. And you communicate that through various stakeholders. So whether they're employee groups, there are a lot of people that have something riding on this and they have skin in the game. And so you don't want to just communicate to a specific group. You want to communicate to as many groups as you possibly can. Next, you want to engage folks. And that's really about creating a meaningful partnership. Um, when you look at employee data, you can sometimes find there are inclusion gaps between different groups. So Just an example, just throwing out in this case, perhaps teachers believe they're more engaged than custodial workers, or the lunchroom folks are more engaged than the security folks. And so you want to make sure that there's consistency in that engagement to make sure that you're including all folks, because really the goal is engagement, and sometimes communication and lack of outreach can be reflected in engagement. And then finally, you want to sustain all this. You want to make sure that you're able to keep this going long term. So again, a lot of times when things are new or there's a change, there's excitement and energy about it. But this goes back to what I talked about before, making sure that you have that process discipline in place to make sure you could sustain the changes. So at the end of the day, coming to the end of this is really how are we going to define success there? You can have a lot of conversations, meet with people, pull together data, pull together KPI and these sorts of things. But what really needs to happen is that there has to be really this agreed upon measure. We don't want to move goalposts or anything like that, but an agreed upon measure to really understand what things are going to look like at day 100. So the first is, I think, at day 100 there will be an agreement on what those actual success indicators look like, and so those success indicators will likely be some sort of KPIs. Um, and that could be whether it's a KPI, a project, that could be something as simple as looking at what dashboards look like, who's going to be involved in what decisions and what actions. Second, and again, I didn't put numbers deliberately because I don't want these aren't stacked ranked in any way, but I just say second because it's the next one. But stakeholder engagement should be completed. So by day 100, all those stakeholders that I discussed getting in front of and getting their opinions, that should be completed by day 100. Again, at least some sort of workforce baseline should be established around that time as well. And again, it's not to say that that baseline might not change if we get different data, but at least some level of baseline should be established so that we could start measuring ourselves on. Specifically, the priorities around talent and human capital should be defined. And again, um, 100 days is a decent amount of time to get that done. So really what you want to be able to do is spend the rest of the time working toward those priorities. At some point in time, we got to establish, okay, these are our priorities. Now, again, if data comes and there is a need to pivot and change things, then that's what we do. Next, there'll be a few early initiatives that get launched, and particularly I call these like kind of those easy wins. So when it comes to any sort of change or anything new, it's really a great idea to just identify some low-hanging fruit, some easy wins, just to get people excited and engaged. And again, at the end of the day, really get those shared measures established. And so what that means is how often will I be reporting this data? What does that cadence look like? Is there a scorecard that's weekly, monthly, and who those measures are being shared with? So at the end of the day, what I'd like to leave the committee thinking about is ultimately for me, success is not about completing the transformation. It's about creating that clarity and trust. And really, like I said, you guys are doing a lot of wonderful things there. I see this position as really building on that momentum, and then possibly bringing some more discipline involved of evidence-based decision making, also being a bit more collaborative, and really servicing the customers and kind of bringing that customer service environment. So I would like to thank you for taking this time with me, and I look forward to the rest of the process. Thank you.